Okay. Hi. So tell me first your name so that others could know you and where you are now and that sort of things.
My name is Rebecca Waletich, and I am from the United States. I'm smack dab, probably in the middle, in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay. Um, and if you could describe you as a person, your passions, your hobbies, I don't know, your qualities, what would that be?
I think um, if I have to say the thing that's coming to my mind right now, and since we're Gestaltists, I'll just go with that because that's part of what we're supposed to do.
Me.
Um, I'm very passionate about feeling like I'm being useful in some way. I feel like if at the end of my life people can say that I've been useful to humanity, useful to them, then I'll feel like a life well lived. Specifically, the things that draw me, like the causes that draw me, um, are LGBTQ and mostly trans on that, especially because in this country right now, it's safer to be lesbian, bi, or gay, but to be trans is still pretty dangerous. So that feels like an area where my skill set can be useful. So I've spent most of my career focusing on how to be an expert and how to be as helpful as I can be to that population.
Mhm, mhm. Anything else you can think of in terms of your interests and qualities you would like to add?
Well, if I think outside of,
Mhm,
work passions,
mhm,
um, I like to create things. I like to create systems and models. Like I've rearranging my house or creating some sort of a structure to make things work better. That's the kind of thing that really kind of geeks me out when I'm off of work, is to figure out how to
mhm, mhm,
build things to make the space I'm in
mhm,
work better.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay, so they are similar in a way. I mean, this professional and out of professional sphere that you like when things work, when you make them work. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay, thanks.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah, yeah, great, great. And what, yeah, the next question is who has had the most impact on you in your life?
There
As,
are so many people who I could say, but when you say most on
mm,
my life, that brings me back to earlier life, and I would have to say my grandma on my mother's side, Leela. Um, my mom was a single mom,
mhm,
so she needed my grandma to watch us a lot. So I spent a lot of time as a young child at my grandma's house, and I remember, like, my grandma was she was just great. She would help me do crafts, and like, she was a elementary school teacher when she worked. So she had all kinds of things she did with little kids, and everything we did that was play and felt like play and was fun was actually teaching me something. Like, she would bring out crafts to help me learn to tell time, and she taught me how to sew, and like, so all of these things that I just thought of as fun when I were little were actually just amazing learning opportunities for me. And I think about, often in this kind of a setting where I'm melding work and personal thing together, I remember I would go to church with my grandma, because my grandma and grandpa met in a seminary, which is like a place where preachers learn to be preachers.
mhm,
And so religion was a really huge part of their life. So on Sunday, I didn't want to go to little kids Sunday school, because for me, I was really there to be with grandma. It
mhm,
wasn't about anything else for me. So she would bring me to her Sunday school class, which was older, retired people doing a Bible study. And she belonged to American Baptist Church,
mhm,
which is pretty conservative, not the most conservative of the conservative, but pretty up there. And I remember this particular day, I was like 9, and I'm just coloring, you know, because I'm 9. And so I'm coloring and kind of listening. And then I start to notice everyone's mad at my grandma. And so I perk up and pay attention, and everyone's like very heated and saying how she's wrong. And I'm listening and realizing they're mad at her because of this friend of hers that I've kind of met, who I know also goes to the church. And I know she's helping this friend. And I'm trying to figure out why they're mad. And what I kind of pieced together later and through the end of that was they were angry because this friend was a transgender woman, and she was transitioning and trying to do it while still being a part of the church. And grandma was helping her because she had lost her job, she had lost her family, she was living in someone's garage. So grandma was helping her. And I remember watching my grandma calmly and intellectually explaining to them that when they would throw Bible verses at her that tell her she's wrong, she would calmly and intellectually explain the history behind her understanding of the scripture, and explained that her job was to love and support and not to judge. And I remember being so amazed. I'm getting chills thinking about it now, and impressed at how this little frail gray woman, just with a very calm but firm voice, using her intellect and her compassion, was able to shut down an entire group of very vitriolic people. And it really touched me. And I think that was an instructive moment for me. Oh, tears.
Yeah, that's okay.
Not only because of watching her skill in that moment and wanting to be like that, but also to see how she can look at these messages that are being given to her by her religion, that, you know, LGBTQ is wrong and all that, and still use her brain to be like, I'll listen to that, learn. I'm not going to accept that wholesale. I'm going to really look at that critically. And that impressed me a lot too. And I think having her as a grandma has really forged who I am. And that was the only time we ever talked about trans stuff, transgender stuff with grandma. It wasn't like a conversation we kept having. That wasn't part of why I came to where I'm at. I mean, consciously, it's not part of what brought me to work with transgender people. But I know in the back of my brain that left that open and fertile to kind of keep having other things in my life percolate and come together to make me who I am now.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, her approach and her skills, and in this very church on that very day, but also, as you said, when she was playing with you and teaching, and what you said before about yourself and your passions is really like you know, somehow taken from her, like it's really a heritage. It's yeah, wow. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question, which is basically more or less the same, but it's about circumstances or some events that shaped you as a human being. Could you, you know, recall yourself of some?
I think, you know, I'm just going to go with the ones that come off the top of my head, and we'll just go from there. I guess I'll talk about my brother a little bit. Yeah, no, I don't want to go there. It'll turn into a crying therapy session if I do that. So circumstance or events that shape me. Let's just, I'll kind of skip over that in a, you know, There were several men in my life growing up, some family, some not family, who were very unkind to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely shaped me in that, while I admire my grandma's calm, intellectual demeanor, I think those circumstances gave me a little more fight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I'm in a situation where I see someone victimized or oppressed, I have to struggle to stay so calm, because I think those other things have come together to, when that part of me gets triggered, I get, so that's, another thing that forged me. I think, if I want to move my brain forward into more, what brought me to Gestalt, I'll have to talk about Margie. Margie Davis Minton was a therapist of mine when
Mm-hmm.
I was, oh, 20, and maybe 25. And I had had a lot of therapy, mostly because of those experiences that I just hopped over, those kinds of experiences. And all of the therapy before that, I feel like, just took the surface off. If
Mm-hmm.
it were, if it was a garden, they just pulled the tops off the weeds, but they left the roots all in there. So
Mm-hmm.
it would feel better for a little while. And Margie was just able to sit with me and help me really dig down to those roots, um, and work through some of the trauma and some of the things that had come from the trauma in a more impactful way. And I did not turn off the sound of my phone. Margie was able to help me work through those things in a much more impactful way. And then later in my life, I was at a different employment. I was a therapist already, and I was at an employer, and they brought in Margie to be the supervisor for us. So not only did I get to work with Margie in my own therapy in my 20s, more, in my late 20s, early 30s, she got to be my clinical supervisor. So I got to kind of learn the magic behind her methods.
Mm-hmm.
And and she taught me to chair work. She taught me, what other phenomenology, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't teach me the word phenomenology. I had no idea she was a gestaltist. She
Uh,
was just teaching me the skills, but I didn't have a vessel for them, but I had the skills. And I believe that, the work I did with her as a supervisor and as a client, um, made me the therapist I am. She was, very much formative in that, um, even though I didn't have the word Gestalt yet for it.
mm-hmm. 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 Thank you. It's in fact, this is the question I was to ask you about how did you come to Gestalt. But yeah, but if you could go on with that, how then you started your Gestalt training, and
So, in this country, they, don't teach, there's not like a school for Gestalt necessarily, or a school for psychodynamic. It's just general therapy. And I'm a social worker, and I know in some countries social workers don't do therapy. In this country they do. And in my opinion, and we'll just leave it with my opinion, but I think I'm correct. Social workers, because of our training, if you compare us to some of the other master's programs that do therapy, I think we connect to people, relate to people, and understand systems better than any of the other therapies. Um, some of the other therapists are so concerned with pathologizing someone's brain
Mhm.
that they forget that this person is sitting in a system that also impacts them, and that sometimes the thing wrong with your client has nothing to do with your client. Sometimes it's their environments, and other professions in this country are not trained well on that. So for that, I think social work is a wonderful foundation, but we spend so much time in our schooling on that foundational piece that we don't really teach our people a comprehensive therapeutic model, a vessel to hold that that knowledge. So I came out of school, I think I think I am an excellent therapist. I think I've always been an excellent therapist because I think I have good instincts, and I think I've had my grandma to teach me and all those things. But it wasn't until even after Margie, because Margie taught me tools, but I still felt like I was just walking into every session with a great tool bag, but no real framework to use it. I was like, somebody would say something to me, I'd be like, okay, what do I do with that? And I'm digging through my tool bag and trying this one on, and you know, it generally worked, but it felt more frantic on the inside, and probably took longer for the client on the outside because I'm just throwing things at the wall, seeing what works. And I think over years and years of practice, even though I was doing well and getting good feedback and all of that, I was feeling like I was hitting a wall. I was feeling like there's got to be something more. And there was and I had figured out through like little studies here and there that the things Margie was teaching me were Gestalt. And so that kind of like, okay, so if these tools, some of my favorite tools in my toolbox, are some of my most effective, then maybe there's something more to do with it. Indianapolis called the Indiana Gestalt Institute. And I didn't know much about it other than it existed. So they had a one-day introduction, like just come try it thing. So I went to that, and it was an all-day Saturday thing. I remember the very first breakout, like all Charlie had done was teach a little bit of phenomenology and a little bit of reflecting that. That was all that he had done. And he said, okay, I want you guys to break up in dyads and go and just do this on each other. And like, we're the first hour into this 8-hour thing, super early. And so I go down and sit down with this other person, and I immediately sit how I always or usually sit, with my knees up, kind of holding onto my knees. And in my head, I had always believed, oh, I just do this because I'm super casual and cool. You know, that's what I had told myself, right? And so this other therapist, she goes, it's interesting that you immediately put your legs up in the chair. And she goes, what would it be like if you put your legs down? So, you know, I'm a pretty compliant client, and I put my legs down, and then I start to realize that I have all this energy in the middle of my stomach and all this focus on literally my stomach. And I start to realize that I'm putting my legs up to cover my stomach. I'm putting my legs up because I think I'm fat. And I had told myself that I had gotten over that a long time ago, that I had gotten over all the body stuff that society throws into us a long time ago. That's what I had believed here, but it turns out that's not true. And it was that phenomenological experiment that helped reveal that to me. And I thought, if here I am, a seasoned therapist, having been through therapy after therapy after therapy, a good deal of it on body image stuff, and this was hiding from me right below the surface, there's something to this modality that I need to know more about. So I've completed 3 years of Gestalt training now. So that's, yeah. And that, I feel like that has enriched not only my practice and my life, because I now feel like I have that container. When people come and bring things to me, I no longer have that moment of internalized panic where I'm scrambling for a toolkit, because I now kind of understand how to frame my sessions and how to use myself and how to use what the client brings to me in a much more logical is not the right word, but I'll just say structured. There's got to be a better word than structure because I've used that 8 times, but we'll just go with it.
Yeah. Okay. And so now grounded in Gestalt therapy, what you partly said that, but if you could just for a moment address that, what attracted you or attracts you most in Gestalt therapy? Maybe practice, maybe theory, whatever you simultaneously think of.
Yeah, I think the first thing I think of is its focus on the here and now, the phenomenology that comes up. I think that for me is the magic. That's I always have that as a thing to fall back on in session when I start to feel lost, to be able to say, yeah, I'm feeling kind of like I don't know where to go, and the fruit that comes from that is something I can count on. Like I realize that there's always something there. One of my educators always says there's gold in them there hills. That's what he always says when he talks about that. Is that there's gold there. So there's always gold there. I think that keeps me coming back. That practice. I think it's a mindful practice, which is something, when I look at the little bits of education I had gotten prior to Gestalt, a lot of it was Gestalt. I just didn't know it. Like it came from that, like phenomenology. I used to do, like, I'd go to these somatic trainings, and I realized that's just phenomenology. Or I'd go to these mindfulness trainings and I realized, oh, well, that's already in Gestalt. And so all of these things that all of these random tools I put together were actually in there already. So I think that's another thing that keeps me, is that something inside of me has been bringing me to Gestalt all of this time, because the things that I would seek out, the individual tools off the tool shelf that I'd be like, oh, that feels like it'd be useful, all are already in the Gestalt toolkit. So it,
and slowly it integrated into this whole and container and the content. Lovely story, and it's really like very put in a very Gestalt way, like a figure that's emerging. I'm thanks to that, I am more now concentrating on on my here and now, whether my legs are on the chair or on the ground. Why? Well, but it's inspiring what you are saying. This is what I want to say, that it's and grounding at the same time, because it's stressful for me too to be here and asking you questions. Okay, so let's go on. Well, you said what you got from Gestalt therapy, and how could you say even that your graduation is very a recent fact and a recent event, but for sure there are things that you could say that you contribute somehow to Gestalt therapy, if not to the known Gestalt therapy world, therapy culture, whatever community, but to your clients. And how would you say that?
So one of the things that I'm excited to bring to Gestalt is my expertise in working with people who are gender diverse. I think that there are a lot of therapists, Gestalt therapists and other therapists, who don't know what they don't know about gender diverse people. They feel like, oh, well, I'm not a jerk and I affirm their right to be whoever they say they want to be, so I can do work with gender diverse people, not knowing that there are other layers of things to know, and that you can do harm if you don't know what you don't know. I think there's some awareness in the therapeutic world that that you need to have some specialized medical understanding to work with people with maybe eating disorders. You wouldn't work without education on somebody who's anorexic and obviously emaciated. You would understand that this is something that takes a whole team approach, and I need to have some basic expertise in this, or I could do harm. So that's what. And also some delusional disorders, you understand that if you're dealing with some real psychoses here, you better know something specific about that. You just can't be a good person, because you could do harm. But I don't think people necessarily know that when it comes to gender diverse. They think, oh, if I'm a good person and affirming, I can just do work with this population. And that's not true, because there's vulnerability there, and there's a medical component that you need to understand. And social workers and therapists have historically done a lot of harm to this population. So I've been trying to work with committees and Gestaltists to bring that piece of the education in. I teach at a lot of conferences, local conferences and state conferences, specifically about therapy with gender diverse people, and I bring a lot of Gestalt into that. Even though the groups I talk to generally, generalist therapists, they're not Gestaltists necessarily. The tools I bring in are Gestalt tools, and I talk about how to use those as well as other therapeutic tools with this population in a way that's safe.
Mm-hmm. Just a thought popped in. Have you been considering now, under these times of coronavirus, to do it online? You know, for
trainings, you mean,
for
specifically?
Gestalt community, maybe. Yeah, like I don't know whether you are now following the, for instance, AAGT listserv, and there is David Pico who is giving online how to do Gestalt therapy online. Yeah, so just.
I love that idea of reaching out and to do something maybe for the AAGT population for that online. I'm hopeful that the virus will allow us to have our conference in Ireland. I'm still hopeful of that, and I am teaching a half-day workshop there specifically on gender. In addition to that, I'm working with the Gestalt New Voices, and I've put in a chapter on, or an article on, how to do work through that as well. So, so
yeah, this is the thing I wanted, to get at as well. I mean, the article. Okay, yeah. Let's go on then. What are your greatest memories in Gestalt?
Greatest memories in Gestalt. I think greatest. That's such a big word. And so every memory I have, I'm putting up against the word greatest. Like, is that it? No. So I'm gonna edit out the word greatest, because I think that's stopping me. So I'm gonna some great. I won't make them the greatest.
Yes.
Some great. I remember early in my training, there's a client who I've been seeing for years, and they, them, their pronouns, and they were open to me kind of switching my model to a more Gestalt model. They were a psychology student for a long time, so they kind of knew what Gestalt was, but they were really annoyed with the phenomenology piece, with the body awareness piece, because, if you are transgender, your body is a source of trauma, because it's not working with you the way you want it to. So body awareness, you have to inch into it very carefully and mindfully. So, most days they would come in and I would, say, so take a moment to breathe and tell me what's coming up for me, what you notice in your body, or what comes up for you in your mind. And I just kind of open that up as a way. And usually there's some dismissive answer. And this particular day, they walked in and sat down, and I introduced like I normally do. And they said, "Oh, I mean, it feels kind of bad there, but I think I just had a bad burrito." And then they wanted to hop on to the next thing, and I was like, no, let's talk about that bad burrito. And I asked them to take a breath, and I asked them to put their hand on there and breathe with me for a moment. And they go, and they put their hand there, and they went, and then on the second breath, tears just started flooding out of them. And then after, I sat with them for a while as they cried. And once they kind of got themselves together, they said, as soon as I took that breath, I got this picture of someone who I've lost. And I didn't realize I was still struggling with that grief. I thought it was gone, but I realized when I took that breath that it's not gone. And I remember from that moment on, they were less annoyed by the questions about their body, because I think that taught them some of the reason. They knew the reason because they'd studied Gestalt in a not a they were going to do it kind of way, but they've read about it kind of way. So they knew the reason, but they didn't know the reason until they experienced it. And so that's stuck with me as one of the things, like, yes, this is why I annoy my clients, and sometimes anger them a little bit by bringing them back down and slowing them down. That it kind of confirmed that.
I can understand what it means for a transgender, to start feeling their body, and wow, amazing. Okay, and and what about challenging moments related to Gestalt? Can you recall of any of them?
Yeah. It's kind of along the same lines, but I think that's why I thought of it. It's another person, also they, them, their pronouns, and they disassociate the fast in 20 years. This is the fastest I've ever seen. If they even get a hint that I'm going to ask them to think about their body, they're gone, and they're gone for 20-30 minutes. It's just, even if I just say, take a breath and notice, as soon as I say notice, whew, they're just like, their brain is gone. They can't feel anything. They're not verbal for a while. So for 2 years, and we have just gotten to the place where I can cue them to breathe, and they'll breathe along with me. That's usually session 2 top. And we're at 2 years, and just even the direction to breathe when I see them hold their breath, because they do that a lot, used to be something that would be hit with a hard no, and now finally they're to the point where there's still no willingness to acknowledge that they feel anything from here down. That's still not going to happen, but they'll breathe. And they're now talking to me about what it's like to disassociate, which is still 3 layers higher than I want to be. I want to get down lower, but it took me 2 years to get there, and they keep coming back. So they must be seeing some value in it, even though it's painfully slow.
Oh, wow. I'm immediately thinking of how to use what you are saying to some of my clients. It's really, I need to talk you into this online workshop for Gestalt therapists, hoping still that Ireland will be. Anyway, okay. Okay, and do you feel like a part of Gestalt community? Such a question.
I do in a couple ways. One is because I've had 3 years in the Gestalt community here, the local Gestalt community. I've brought away therapist friends and peers from that locally, and I feel very very much respected by my teachers there. So I know that I could call on them if I need something, or need some support, or need to go back for some supervision or something like that. So there's that local community. And then having gone to Toronto, I think
Mhm.
2 years ago now,
So,
yeah, almost 2 years ago now,
yeah.
um, that the first day at the pre-conference was what really, there was an all-day thing. It's where I met you, and that all-day workshop on LGBTQ was so impactful for me to have the opportunity to sit all day with Gestaltists from all over the world, and kind of get an idea of how different it is, different therapy training is in different worlds, and um, still, even with the differences, that was very impactful to me. And I feel like I brought friends out of that will be lifelong friends.
Mm. 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 And what do you think will be with Gestalt in the future? What's the future of Gestalt?
Hmm. So I fantasize about um, finding ways to integrate Gestalt more into the foundational education that we have for our therapists in this country. So it's not something where everyone leaves school with their master's claiming to be eclectic. That's the thing you're going to hear if you talk to many therapists who are 2 or 3 years out in from licensure. Here, they're going to say, "Oh, I'm eclectic. I use a little bit of everything," and I think that is a real problem with our model here.
Mhm.
Um, so I hope to bring more awareness
Mhm. Mhm.
here of why having some training in a model, even if it's not Gestalt, although I think it should be Gestalt personally, a model is beneficial to therapists and to their clients. Um, so I think that for this country is the first step, even just helping most therapists understand, again, that there are things they don't know because they don't know what they don't know. You
Mhm.
know, they think, oh, I don't need a model because and what you'll hear is there's weaknesses in every model. So people will say, I don't want to lean completely into one model because then I will have their good parts, but also their weak parts. So I want to learn a little bit about all the models so then I can pick and choose what's good. And that there's logic to that. But if you don't sit with a model long enough,
Mhm.
you don't really know how to use it. And I feel like once you've sat with that model long enough, then you can recognize the weaknesses, and then, bring in some patches. That makes sense. But I feel like you need to sit with that one first. You can't do the,
Yeah.
little bit here, a little bit there, and then really understand what you're doing is too mismatched. So I think that's the first step, is that awareness in this country. And then the next step would be, I think, advocating for people to understand what Gestalt is, because in this area of this country, we don't really learn that in school. We learn a lot of what, and then we jump straight to CBT.
Uh-huh.
That's what we do, and I think it's a real, it's a loss.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
our therapists, and when we learn what psychodynamic is, we learn what Freudian psychodynamic is, like old world psychodynamic. And so social workers look at that and say, that something doesn't feel good about that. So then they just hop straight to CBT and miss everything else that evolved after Freud. And even psychodynamic isn't what it was in Freud's days. So that's a shame too. Um, so I
Mhm.
think that's the first step
Mhm.
here. Um, and then I feel like once, especially social workers, learn what Gestalt is, it just marries with our ethics so well.
Mm.
That I think a lot of social workers will choose that as their base
Mm.
because it's just going to feel like it fits them.
Yeah. Yeah. Besides, many Gestalt therapists, they have social work in their background, as you do. Okay, so that would be, yeah, that was the last question, and I wonder how you are now. Would you like to add anything, or just say how you are?
Um, I have a lot of energy here, and I think it's excited energy. I think it's I was happy to be able to share this because this is
Mhm.
something that is very meaningful to me. This is a practice that has, to bring it back to the beginning, it makes me I feel so much more useful.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And so,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you for making this interview so meaningful. It was really like that. Okay, so let's stop here the recording, and we can also chat a little bit at the end. Okay, thank you.